Watch it, she snapped, voice like cracking ice. The bitch, Beatrice Vanderbilt, thought Alara was beneath her. Just another cog in the gilded machine of Aurelia. But Beatrice, with Julian Thorne's sapphire ring glittering on her finger, had no clue. That ring. It was a ghost from Alara's past, a stolen heirloom. Star of Serafina, they called it. See, Alara wasn't just a waitress. She was a Caldwell, stripped bare by Thorne's family. A storm was brewing behind Alara's quiet eyes. They all thought she'd crumble, disappear back into the shadows. Little did they know, her family's history was about to crash their party. That glint of defiance? They had no idea. It was kindness turned to steel. Watch it, she snapped, voice like cracking ice. The bitch, Beatrice Vanderbilt, thought Alara was beneath her. Just another cog in the gilded machine of Aurelia. But Beatrice, with Julian Thorne's sapphire ring glittering on her finger, had no clue. That ring? It was a ghost from Alara's past, a stolen heirloom. Star of Serafina, they called it. See, Alara wasn't just a waitress. She was a Caldwell, stripped bare by Thorne's family. A storm was brewing behind Alara's quiet eyes. They all thought she'd crumble, disappear back into the shadows. Little did they know, her family's history was about to crash their party. That glint of defiance? They had no idea. It was kindness turned to steel. The rhythm of Aurelia was a heartbeat, a steady pulse of clinking silverware against china that both soothed and mocked Alara. From her station, tucked near the service bar, she watched the gilded theater of New York's elite. Tonight, the soft golden light danced on diamond bracelets and the polished silver domes of the cloches. Once, she'd belonged on that stage. A decade ago, champagne had been served, to her, not by her. The Caldwell estate in Greenwich had echoed with laughter, not the hushed whispers of disdain. Her father, Robert Caldwell, a man whose handshake was his bond, had presided over a shipping empire built on old-world integrity. Her mother, Serafina, had possessed an understated elegance, her most treasured possession being a sapphire ring, the Star of Serafina, a cornflower blue dream cradled by platinum vines. It wasn't mere jewelry. It was a piece of their family history, a symbol of generations of Caldwell success and love. Then came the fall, a brutal orchestrated collapse. Hostile takeovers masked as shrewd business, betrayals whispered in boardrooms. All of it swallowed the Caldwell empire whole. Robert's old-fashioned values were no match for the ravenous sharks of modern finance. They lost everything: the estate, the art collection, the family name. The treachery broke Robert. A stroke silenced his booming voice, trapping him in a body that was now a cage. Alara's meager wages barely kept him comfortable in the upstate facility. 2 years later, Serafina followed, her heart unable to bear the weight of their ruin. She died in a cramped, unfamiliar apartment, the scent of someone else's cooking a constant reminder of their fall. The Star of Serafina, one of the last things to go, was sold in a desperate, private transaction to cover mounting medical bills. Alara, barely 16, could still feel the phantom weight of the ring in her mother's trembling hands as it disappeared into a velvet box. Now at 26, she was Alara Caldwell, art history student by day, waitress by night. The irony was a bitter pill. She studied masterpieces in textbooks, then served overpriced meals to those who owned them. She curated empty plates, not priceless artifacts. Her history was a hidden exhibit, forbidden to touch. But tonight, the exhibit was about to be unveiled. Tonight, Table 7 was occupied by Julian Thorne, the architect of the modern age. At 34, Thorne was a titan of technology and finance, a man whose decisions could shatter economies. His company, Omnicorp, had its fingers in everything from satellite technology to biotech. He was famously ruthless, impossibly handsome, and perpetually cloaked in an aura of untouchable power. And beside him sat his fiancée, Beatrice Vanderbilt, the quintessential Thorne accessory, flawless, impeccably dressed, with the bored, dismissive air of someone born swimming in privilege. Her Vanderbilt pedigree was as sharp as her couture. "Table 7, Mr. Dubois," her manager had barked, his face a mask of permanent stress. "Flawless, Caldwell. Thorne is particular, invisible, Efficient. She'd nodded, her face schooled in professional neutrality. She'd served arrogant billionaires before. They all possessed the same hollow gaze, the same ability to look through her, not at her. As she approached their table with a bottle of Chateau Margaux, her movements fluid and practiced, she offered a murmured, "Mr. Thorne, Miss Vanderbilt," her voice a low, respectful hum. Thorne didn't even glance up from his phone, offering only a grunt of acknowledgement. Beatrice, however, extended her hand for her wine glass, and the overhead chandelier flared across her fingers. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Time seemed to warp and slow. There it was. Not a similar ring, not a replica. The ring, the star of Serafina. The unique star-shaped halo of diamonds surrounding the impossibly deep blue sapphire was unmistakable. The intricate platinum filigree on the band, designed to look like interwoven vines, was exactly as she remembered. A wave of nausea and vertigo slammed into her. The sounds of the restaurant faded to a dull roar. She was 16 again, watching her mother's face crumble as the ring was placed into a velvet box and stolen away forever. Her hand trembled, a single drop of crimson wine beating on the pristine white tablecloth. Beatrice snatched her hand back as if Ilara were contagious. "Watch it," she snapped, voice like cracking ice. Julian Thorne finally looked up, his gray eyes cold as a winter storm, fixing on Ilara. Not angry yet, merely annoyed, as one might be at a buzzing fly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Dubois' warning screamed in her head. "Be invisible. Don't speak." Her job, her father's care, everything hung in the balance of her silence. But seeing that ring, sparkling on the finger of a woman who wore it like a bauble while her father languished, broke something inside her. The Caldwell pride, buried beneath years of hardship, surged to the surface. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but the silence was unbearable. Each second that ticked by felt like a lifetime of unspoken grief, injustice, and rage. She had to say something, anything. She swallowed hard, her gaze locked on the ring. The blood roared in her ears, but she found her voice, shaky yet clear, cutting through the hushed ambiance of Aurelia. "I'm sorry," she began, her eyes lifting to meet Julian's steely gaze. "It's just that ring." She paused, drawing in a deep breath, finding her resolution at the point of no return. That ring was not just a material thing, it was a family heirloom, a piece of her history, a piece of her heritage. "My mother once owned that ring," in his briefcase. Alistair Thorne was in his study, a cavernous room of dark wood and leather, a portrait of himself hanging over the marble fireplace. He was a man who radiated power even in his old age, his eyes still holding the predatory gleam that had made him a legend. "Julian," Alistair said, a pleased smile on his face. "An unexpected visit, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Julian didn't waste time with pleasantries. He walked to the mahogany desk and dropped the folder on it. The sound echoed in the silent room. The Caldwell ring. Julian said, his voice flat and cold. "I want you to tell me about it." Alistair's smile didn't falter, but a shudder came down over his eyes. The family heirloom. What about it? Did Beatrice not like it? "We can find another. Stop lying." Julian snapped the words erupting from him with a force that surprised them both. "I know where it came from. I know you bought it off Robert Caldwell after you destroyed him. I know it's not a Thorne heirloom. I want to know why. Why would you give it to me and tell me it was Grandma's?" Alistair leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm. He steepled his fingers. "It was a lesson, Julian. A story. All heirlooms begin somewhere. We are the start of a new dynasty, one more powerful than the Caldwells ever were. I took their symbol and made it ours. It's a symbol of your birthright. It represents the victory of our way of doing things over their antiquated, sentimental nonsense." Julian stared at his father, truly seeing him for the first time. He wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was a man who reveled in the humiliation of his rivals. A man who saw cruelty as a virtue. "You destroyed a man's life," Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. "You took his legacy, his company, his wife's ring, and you call it a lesson. I call it winning," Alistair retorted, his voice hardening. A lesson you seem to have forgotten. I heard about the incident at Aurelia. The waitress, you should have crushed her. You should have sued her into oblivion the moment she opened her mouth. Instead, you're here questioning me, looking like a sentimental fool yourself. She told the truth, Julian roared, slamming his fist on the desk. She wasn't lying. Truth. Alistair laughed a dry, humorless sound. Truth is a luxury for people who can't afford lawyers. We make our own truth, Julian. I gave you that ring as a reminder of who you are. A thorn, the son of a winner. Now I suggest you go back to your fiancée, forget all this nonsense and start acting like it. Julian felt a chasm open between him and his father. He had spent his life aspiring to be this man, to earn his approval, to be even more ruthless, more successful. Now looking at him, all he felt was a profound sense of disgust and shame. The entire foundation of his identity, the legacy he was meant to carry, was built on a bed of lies and cruelty. He picked up the folder, his hands steady now. The rage had cooled into a hard, clear resolve. No, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. I think for the first time I'm going to act like a man, not just a thorn. He turned and walked out of the study, leaving Alistair sitting in the dark, the portrait of his own mug face, mocking him from above the fireplace. Julian didn't know what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't live with the truth buried, and the only person who deserved to hear it was the one person whose life he had threatened to annihilately destroy. He had to find Caldwell. Finding Ara's apartment was easy for a man with Julian's resources. Getting out of his chauffeured Maybach in her rundown Queens neighborhood was another matter. The building was a pre-war walk-up with crumbling facade and a faint smell of boiled cabbage in the hallway. It was a universe away from his glass tower in Manhattan. For the first time, Julian felt like an intruder, an alien species stepping into a world he had only ever viewed from a great and comfortable height. He found her door number 4B and hesitated. What was he going to say? Sorry, my father destroyed your family and I threatened to finish the job. He carried a small, heavy velvet box in his coat pocket. It felt like a lead weight on his conscience. Taking a deep breath, he knocked. The door opened a crack held by a brass security chain. One of Ara's brown eyes, wide and fearful, peered out at him. The instant she recognized him, the fear was replaced by a flash of anger. What are you doing here? She demanded, her voice low and tense. Have your lawyers come to serve the papers personally? No, Julian said quickly. No lawyers. I please talk to you for a moment? It's important. She stared at him for a long moment, suspicion etched on her face. Why should I talk to you? Because I was wrong, he said the words, feeling foreign and clumsy on his tongue. And because you were right. His admission seemed to stun her more than his threats had. After a tense silence, she slid the chain off and opened the door, stepping back to let him in, but not welcoming him. Her apartment was tiny but clean. Books were stacked on every available surface. Art history texts next to worn paperbacks. A small desk was cluttered with notes for her studies. On a small end table was a single-frame photograph of a beautiful smiling woman wearing the star of Serafina Caldwell. The reality of his family's actions hit him with renewed force. You have 5 minutes, Alara said, crossing her arms. She stood by the window, putting as much distance between them as the small room would allow. Julian didn't know where to begin, so he started with the truth. I investigated your claim, he said, his voice formal. I looked into the ring's provenance, and I looked into the history of Caldwell shipping. He paused, meeting her weary gaze. You were telling the truth about everything. The inscription is there. The ring belonged to your mother, and my father, Alistair Thorne, was the man behind the hostile takeover that ruined your family. Ara didn't look surprised. She just looked tired, a bitter sadness settling in her eyes. So you know, she said quietly. You know, and you came here. Why to gloat? To tell me you finished the job your father started? No, Julian said, taking a step closer. I came here to apologize. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. He didn't open it. He simply held it out to her. And to return this, it belongs to you. It always has. Ara stared at the box in his outstretched hand, as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't move to take it. "You think you can just show up here with that ring and apologize?" she asked, her voice trembling with a decade of repressed grief and anger. "You think that makes it right? Do you have any idea what my family went through? My father, he sits in a chair all day, unable to speak because of what your father did. My mother died of a broken heart in a place just like this. And you? You stood in that restaurant and threatened to take the last little bit I had left. An apology and a ring. Don't fix that." Every word was a deserved blow, and Julian took them without flinching. "I know they don't," he said, his voice roar with a sincerity he rarely felt. "Nothing can fix it, but it's a start. I didn't know, Alara. I swear to you, I didn't know the history. My father told me it was my grandmother's. I was arrogant and cruel, and I am more sorry than I can possibly say for what I did to you that night." He placed the box on the small coffee table between them. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it. I just want you to have what is rightfully yours." Era finally looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a billionaire titan. She saw a man grappling with a terrible truth, his usual mask of cold authority stripped away, revealing something more complex and pained underneath. The tension in the room was broken by the shrill ring of Julian's phone. He glanced at the caller ID. It was Beatrice. He ignored it. It rang again immediately. "You should probably get that," Era said, her tone flat. "Your fiancée must be worried." "She's not my fiancée anymore," Julian stated simply. R's eyebrows shot up. "What?" "I ended it this afternoon," he explained. "When I confronted her with the truth about the ring, her only concern was how much it was worth and whether I would be buying her a bigger one to replace it. She said she didn't want to be associated with your family's drama." He let out a humoral laugh. "It turns out our entire relationship was as hollow as my father's story about the ring. That piece of information changed the dynamic in the room. He hadn't just come to apologize. He had started to dismantle the life built on that lie. He had stood up to his fiancée and Asara now knew to his powerful father. It was a seismic shift." Era slowly walked over to the coffee table and looked down at the velvet box. She didn't open it. "What will your father do?" she asked. "I don't care," Julian said. "This is bigger than him. It's bigger than Thorn Industries. This is about justice or something like it." He looked around her apartment at the books and the single photo of her mother. "What happened to your family was wrong, and I want to help you make it right." Era looked from the box to his face. The offer was terrifying and tantalizing. For 10 years she had been powerless, a victim of forces far beyond her control. Now the son of her family's destroyer was standing in her living room offering her the one thing she had never dared to hope for, a chance to fight back. She finally reached out and picked up the velvet box. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The star of Serafina winked up at her, its blue depths seeming to hold all the sorrow and beauty of her past. She closed the box with a soft click. "Okay, Thorn," she said, her voice steady and clear, her eyes locking with his. "Let's talk about justice." The small apartment, once a symbol of Era's reduced circumstances, became the unlikely headquarters for their alliance. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. It was no longer a billionaire and a waitress. It was two people bound by a shared ugly history, seeking a truth that could either redeem them or destroy them both. Julian, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and leveraging billions, found himself deferring to Era's knowledge of her family's history. She brought out old company ledgers, her father's diaries, and letters that painted a vivid picture of Caldwell shipping before its fall. It was a company built on trust and a sense of family among its employees, a stark contrast to the cutthroat, impersonal machine of Omni P. "My father's partner, a man named Marcus Blackwood, betrayed him," Ara explained one evening, pointing to a name in one of the diaries. "My father trusted him like a brother. According to his journal, Marcus was the one who convinced him to take on a risky level of debt for a new fleet expansion right before a manufactured slump in the market. It left the company vulnerable. It was the opening your father needed. Julian took the information and fed it to Mickey's team. Within a day, they had a financial trace. Marcus Blackwood had received a multi-million-dollar payment from one of Alistair's shell corporations 2 months after the bankruptcy. He was now living a life of quiet luxury in the Cayman Islands. It was the smoking gun. Their collaboration was intense. They spent long hours together, fueled by coffee and a mutual burning need for resolution. Julian saw the brilliant analytical mind that had been hiding behind a waitress's apron. Ara, in turn, began to see past the arrogant corporate raider to the man beneath, a man deeply wounded by his father's deception and desperate to carve out a moral identity of his own. A strange intimacy grew between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something forged in the crucible of their shared mission, a deep and abiding respect. He would watch her, lost in thought, her brow furrowed as she deciphered a line from her father's notes, and feel a sense of admiration he had never felt for the polished, superficial women in his own circle. She would listen as he ruthlessly dissected a financial document, his mind, a weapon of incredible precision, and see the potential for that weapon to be used for good. The ring. The star of Serafina sat on the coffee table during their meetings, a silent witness. Ara never wore it. She said it felt wrong, tainted by the journey it had taken. "It won't feel right on my finger," she told him, "until my father's name is cleared." The biggest challenge remained Alistair Thorne. As soon as Julian began digging deeper, his father fought back. Julian found his corporate accounts frozen, his access to certain company resources revoked. Alistair was sending a clear message: stop this or you will be cut off. One afternoon, Julian returned to his penthouse to find Alistair waiting for him, his face like a thundercloud. "This little quest of yours ends now," Alistair seethed. "You are jeopardizing a multi-billion-dollar enterprise for the sake of some sob story from a girl who should be serving you coffee. You are a thorn. Start acting like it." "I am," Julian replied calmly, loosening his tie. "I'm cleaning up a mess that a thorn made years ago. It's called taking responsibility. You should try it sometime." "Responsibility?" Alistair scoffed. "Let me tell you about responsibility. It's to your shareholders, to your legacy, to the family name, not to the ghosts of failures you walk over on your way to the top. I'm warning you, Julian. Drop this or I will disown you. You will lose everything. I've already lost the one thing I thought I had." Julian said, his voice quiet. "My respect for my father." The finality in his tone shook Alistair. He saw that his threats were useless. Julian was no longer the son who craved his approval. He was his own man. Enraged, Alistair left. But the war had just begun. The final piece of the puzzle was a man named Richard Sterling, the former chief financial officer of Caldwell Shipping, a man who had vanished after the collapse. Ilara remembered him as a kind, nervous man who was devoted to her father. After weeks of searching, Mikhail's team located him, living under a different name in rural Vermont, working as a high school math teacher. Julian and Ara flew to Vermont themselves. They found Sterling in a modest clapboard house. He was older, grayer, and his eyes were filled with a decade of fear. At first, he refused to speak, terrified of Alistair Thorne's reach. But then Ara spoke. She didn't talk about stocks or takeovers. She talked about the company picnics. She talked about how Sterling had taught her to play chess in her father's office. She talked about how her father, Robert Caldwell, had considered him family. Tears welled in the old man's eyes. The dam of his silence finally broke. He confessed everything. Alistair Thorne had not just bribed Marcus Blackwood. He had blackmailed Sterling using a personal indiscretion from his past to force him to cook the books, making the company's position look far worse than it was, and creating the panic that led to its collapse. Sterling had lived with the guilt ever since. He agreed to sign a sworn affidavit detailing Alistair's crimes. With Sterling's testimony and the financial evidence of the bribe to Blackwood, they had everything they needed. They had the undeniable truth. The question was what to do with it. A public lawsuit would be messy, a media circus that would devastate what was left of both their families. "There's only one way this ends," Julian said as they flew back to New York. "It's not in a courtroom, it's in the boardroom." He called a special emergency meeting of the Thorne Industries Board of Directors. It was an unprecedented move, a direct challenge to his father's authority as CEO and chairman. He was risking everything: his position, his inheritance, his entire future. He and walked into the towering Thorne Industries building together. The employees stared as Julian, the heir apparent, strode through the lobby with the former waitress at his side. They were not a couple. They were partners, soldiers marching into their final battle. The truth was their only weapon. The boardroom at Thorne Industries was on the 80th floor, a cathedral of glass and steel overlooking the city. It was Alistair Thorne's throne room, and he sat at the head of the long marble table, his face a mask of cold fury. The 10 board members, powerful men and women who owed their fortunes to Alistair, looked on with a mixture of confusion and trepidation. Julian stood at the opposite end of the table, with Ara seated calmly to his right. She wasn't dressed as a waitress or a student. She wore a simple, elegant gray dress, her posture erect, her gaze steady. She was no longer a victim. She was a Caldwell, reclaiming her family's honor. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Julian began, his voice echoing in the silent room. "I have called this meeting because a matter of grave importance concerning the ethical foundation of this company has come to my attention. It concerns an acquisition made over a decade ago. The company formerly known as Caldwell Shipping." Alistair slammed his hand on the table. "This is a private family matter, Julian. It has no place here. This meeting is adjourned." "It ceased to be a family matter," Julian retorted, his voice cutting through his father's bluster, "when company funds were used to bribe, blackmail, and fraudulently dismantle a competitor. And it became a board matter when the CEO of this company began using his corporate power to obstruct an investigation into those crimes." He proceeded to lay out the entire story, his presentation as precise and devastating as a legal indictment. He presented the bank records proving the bribe to Marcus Blackwood. He read key passages from Richard Sterling's sworn affidavit detailing the blackmail. His narrative was cold, factual, and undeniable. He stripped away the myth of Alistair Thorne, the brilliant strategist, and revealed the truth: Alistair Thorne, the criminal. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They were loyal to Alistair, but they were more loyal to the company's stock price and their own reputations. A public scandal of this magnitude would be catastrophic. Finally, Julian looked directly at his father. "The evidence is overwhelming. It is clear that Alistair Thorne acted illegally and unethically, exposing this company to immense legal and financial risk. Therefore, I am formally making a motion for his immediate removal as CEO and chairman of the board, effective immediately." A stunned silence fell over the room. Julian had not just challenged his father, he had declared war on him in front of his own court. Alistair rose to his feet, his face purple with rage. "You ungrateful whelp," he spat at Julian. "You would throw away your own father, your own legacy for her." He gestured contemptuously at Ara. Ara met his gaze without flinching. "He isn't doing this for me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "He's doing this for the name you tarnished, the name Thorne." That was the final blow. The board saw it. Then this wasn't just about the past, it was about the future. They could side with the corrupt, aging lion or with the young, principled leader who was trying to save the company from his father's sins. One by one they voted. It was almost unanimous. Alistair Thorne was stripped of his titles and forced into retirement. His reign was over. Julian was voted in as the interim CEO. In the aftermath, Julian didn't seek to destroy his father further. The public story was that Alistair was stepping down for health reasons, but in the circles where it mattered, the truth was known. The real justice was not in a prison sentence, but in the quiet, complete dismantling of his power and reputation. The most important part of the resolution happened privately. Julian, as head of Thorne Industries, drew up a settlement. It wasn't charity, it was reparations. A significant sum was transferred to a trust for the Caldwell family, enough to ensure Robert Caldwell would receive the best care for the rest of his life and to restore a measure of the wealth that had been stolen. Furthermore, Julian established a charitable foundation in Serafina Caldwell's name, dedicated to promoting ethical business practices. A week later, Julian found Dara at her father's care facility. She was sitting with him by the window, and for the first time in years, she saw a genuine, peaceful smile on her father's face. Julian waited until she came out. "How is he?" "He's better," Ara said, a real smile gracing her own lips. The new facility is wonderful. He seems at peace. He knows. I think somehow he knows we won. They walked through the facility's garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. I have something for you, Julian said. He handed her a simple envelope. Inside was a job offer, not for a waitress, but for a position as the head curator of the new Thorn Industries art collection, with a special fund to acquire pieces from struggling young artists. It was a perfect blend of her passion and her past. Julian, I don't know what to say, she stammered, overwhelmed. Say you'll think about it, he said with a small smile. He then pulled out the familiar velvet box. There's one last piece of business. He opened it, and the star of Serafina seemed to glow with a new light. It's clean now, he said softly. Its legacy has been restored. It's time for it to go home. He didn't offer it to her. He simply held the box open. This time, Alara reached out without hesitation. She lifted the ring from its velvet cushion. It felt different in her hand, not heavy with sorrow, but a light with possibility. She looked from the ring to Julian's face, seeing in his eyes not the shadow of his father, but the light of a good man who had fought his way out of the darkness. Instead of putting it on her own finger, she took his hand. With a gentle, deliberate motion, she slid the ring onto his pinky finger. What are you doing? He asked, surprised. Alistair was right about one thing, she said, her fingers lingering on his. All heirlooms have to begin somewhere. This ring is no longer just a symbol of my family's past. It's a symbol of our shared future, a reminder of the truth we fought for. Let's create a new legacy for it together. Julian looked down at the ring on his hand, then back up at her, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet peace of the garden, he knew his father's greatest lesson had been a lie. Victory wasn't about what you took from others. It was about what you were willing to build together from the ruins of the truth. What started with 9 simple words from a waitress became a journey of justice, redemption, and the extraordinary power of truth. Alara and Julian proved that a legacy isn't just something you inherit. It's something you build choice by choice, truth by truth. Their story reminds us that even in a world that seems to be ruled by wealth and power, the courage to speak up and the integrity to listen can change everything. They didn't just reclaim a ring. They reclaimed their histories and forged a new future, proving that the most valuable thing in the world isn't a flawless sapphire, but a conscience that is clear. If this story of courage and unexpected alliances moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always matters. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will leave you breathless. Click the notification bell so you never miss a single moment.